Okay, so I was asked on a committee call sort of about a month or so ago that were we going to have a Messier Marathon? And I thought, oh well, let's sort of see when we had our first Messier Marathon. And John Stapleton was exceptionally good in writing up minutes and things for even the main meetings themselves. And so I've dug back in one of the books that I've got languishing up in the study that sort of in a carrier bag that John gave to me. And this was the one. This was the meeting that was back in 24th of February 2004. So this was more or less as we started the society, and basically it was suggested that we have a Messier Marathon. And if you read through that sort of briefly, it was talking we were going for 11th to the 12th of March, and if it was cloudy, then we would move it to a different night. Now, if I go back up the top there, that it says Alan Lorrain gave apologies, and so I wasn't at the original this meeting when they discussed this, and I read the notes and saw that there was going to be lots of soup, and we were going to have a barbecue and keeping warm and so on. And the one thing I remember about this particular one was, yes, it was cold. John Stapleton bought a sort of half oil can barbecue, but didn't get lit until about sort of 10 o'clock. So the soup was cold, and I think I went home at about 11 o'clock. But it wasn't something that I was able to do. So that was that one, and then just have I got there was about a month later. Oops, hang on, you lost me. No. So about a month later, they said that we actually had about 90 objects recovered. So in that case, it was quite a good one, but it wasn't something that I was familiar with back in 2004, and it was something that Military Dave, and I have had a couple of sort of goes on the field but not particularly successfully. And I know John Stapleton was an absolute whiz with the Dobsonian, and it was very much a case that by the time people had set up their go-to telescopes, that he had bagged about sort of 20 objects already. So it's not always the best thing to have a go-to. Okay, so what I was going to do on this one is just to, if we go. Right, so what I prepared sort of for, I think it was a talk just after I came back from La Palma. Effectively, we went on a trip to La Palma, just really by way of introduction. This is, for those of you who have seen it, some of you have, and some of you have been in it, that this is the dome in my, or sort of my makeshift one in the garden. And as you'll see,
we're not seeing that, Alan.
We're not in presenter mode yet, and just seeing the first slide.
Very good. Okay, so that's my observatory with the 12-inch Mead in it, which I got secondhand an awful long time ago, and just as well I did, because it hasn't depreciated quite so much as if I bought it new. So because the line of trees owned by the council right behind it, I can't do anything about. It's got 3 fixed panels at the back with 2 that go down the side and the 3 at the front. So it's a bit of a faff to open it up, and combined with, this is the view that I can see when I do actually open it up, and quite why teenage children have to have the bathroom light on. It's all the way through the night, but that's effectively what I'm faced with. So for that reason, going outside sort of in the UK and with the vagaries of the weather is not particularly attractive. And as such, we set up a few years ago the Basingstoke Astronomical Society Expedition Group, which enables us to go overseas. And this was one of the trips that we went on over to La Palma. So looking at obviously the introduction, why La Palma? This particular one, Bob and I went on the trip to the Athos Star Camp. So I was going to look at the setup that I did and basically why I did a marathon and what results I got. So that's the theme as far as the planned marathon, I think in probably a month or so's time for BAS again. So as far as La Palma is concerned, that obviously people on the call will know very much that Herson and So used to be the site for the Isaac Newton telescope, and it was then moved out to La Palma after much consideration, because basically the UK is not a particularly good place to observe, and Sussex is perhaps on a par with the sea mist and everything else. So it's not a particularly good area. So they looked around back in the sort of the late 60s, early 70s, and decided upon La Palma as being a suitable place. And effectively the La Palma, which you've got here on the, so you've got just off the coast of Africa, obviously the Canaries, you've got La Palma, which is based there, you've got then Tenerife, and the larger islands of Gran Canaria, Fuerteventura, and then Lanzarote. So essentially, it's a dark area. This is taken from satellite, and you've got the African coast, which is coming down here on the right-hand side. You've then got Tenerife here, and La Palma is out, and there's the almost effective isobars for the light pollution. And you can see that around Santa Cruz there is some light pollution, but it's not too bad at all. So that's the reason we chose to go to, or they chose to go to La Palma with the Isaac Newton telescope, and we also choose to go to the Canaries because of the advantageous observing over there. This is a picture that is taken on our trip of the observatories at the top of La Palma. This is taken, in actual fact, it's not a lake. This is the glass roof of the new visitor centre, which they are constructing. It's been hollowed out of a huge sort of hole in the ground, but it's got huge light tubes that go down to light the area down underground, and they've covered those up with a sort of glass ceiling. And this is basically looking for, you can walk around the top. There's a viewing sector around the top, and this picture was taken using it as a reflection for the observatories. These are the magic telescopes at the top. Was it somebody help me, Cherman Solenko? No, of radiation. They've got 2 already, and they were busy building another. I think they're having 5 there, but it's a specific wavelength that they are investigating. This basically shows the line of telescopes going along the ridge, the edge of the caldera. That to the right-hand side is the caldera going right down into the so where the volcano eruptions came out to start with, and looking at the back and to the right is the cloud base that which does do an awful lot to shield any light pollution from the lower levels, because there is an inversion level just below the summit, and this is why the cloud settles at that point. And this is the Grand Tucan. This is the it's not the largest optical. I think it's 2 meter. Is it 2 meter telescope, which is the Spanish version that's taken over from William Herschel, was the largest optical one, but obviously it's going to soon be overtaken by the telescopes out in Chile. But it's amazing enough, they had huge problems with the dome shutting, but they were the only ones who sort of had the experience or any experience on this, and so they actually won the contract for the domes over in Chile as well, even though they couldn't actually get theirs to work particularly well, not at least not in the early stages. That was Dave doing his selfies. That's sort of look at when we sort of were out observing at the top of the mountain at the they call Roca de Mucacos, the rocks at the top of the caldera. So this is a picture taken from the residential centre, and you can see this is a laser beam that is being shone by the William Herschel telescope. They were testing something for the European Observatory over in Chile, but they were testing it. Effectively, they are doing an artificial star. They basically send the laser up, creates a star, and then the telescope can follow that, and the optics can then be changed to keep that laser point in focus. So that means that they can counteract the effects of the movements in the atmosphere. It's not as good as having an observatory above the clouds or above the atmosphere, but it certainly does an awful lot to mitigate the effects of the atmosphere. So the Palma itself, they are particularly keen on astronomy and their dark sky status. Around there are various they're called miradors, which basically can be something as grand as a car park, or can just be a gravel area to the side of the road. But there are these areas which are highlighted on maps, various maps around the island, where you can set up telescopes. They don't normally have power, so you have to have batteries for your kit. But the the new visitor centre at the top does have power, allegedly their power, but we didn't have anything to test it with at that stage, and it wasn't actually open. And the second night we went up there, they'd put barriers all the way across to stop us getting in there, so they're not exactly welcoming in there, getting people to go up there at the moment. This is Polaris this way. This is one of the mirador that you can set up if you want to. This part of the tourist trail that they have around there. Places where I really wanted to go back to sort of on a subsequent visit. Obviously, COVID, eruptions of the volcano in the Palma have put paid to that at the moment. But I thought this would be a wonderful vista to be able to have a sort of Milky Way behind there, whether you can get the direction right or whether it has to be photoshopped in afterwards. That's a mute point, but I think you would probably get the sort of the Milky Way going down behind that, and then obviously lighting it up. As the astronomy competitions seem to be all on nightscapes rather than astronomy ones, I thought it would be a good choice. So this basically was a time when EasyJet were flying to La Palma, and chose the other main industry apart from tourism is the banana trees in that are being grown on the island. And the place where we're going to is Assos Star Camp. This is what used to be a botanical gardens. It's been set up by German Kai as a star campus over there, with the use of telescopes, which I'll talk about in a moment. Effectively, the site is fairly small, but it's got here, if I can show, this is the accommodation. This is one of the accommodation blocks split into two. This is the orangery, or the sort of dining area. This is another sort of accommodation unit. There's another one here with a observing pad on the top, and then there's observing pads here. This is the one which I did the marathon from, and there's another one down by the orangery as well. And at the back here, there's a sort of a large telescope which can be used as well if you're prepared to pay for it. So this is the site. So looking down from the valley, you've got the orangery and dining area, accommodation that Bob and I used, one of the other accommodation areas, and then going over towards the west, the two observing platforms. But this is the type of thing that is available to you. That the reason that there's a barrier around the side is that there's probably about a 20-foot drop on the other side, so not a particularly well designed thing that you could quite even, it's only a couple of feet high, you could topple over it, but it would reduce the field of view if you had it much higher. But you've also got you've got a power unit which can be moved round the whole of this circle, so it can be in different areas as to what your requirements are, with about 4 power sockets on there, so plenty of power. And your telescope can, or at least the mount can be left out over during the daytime, just covered up if you want to. This was the orangery. He's got a collection of antique telescopes and the cooking area down the end. If you do go on the Dave DSW did a blog on there. That's unfortunately when we were there were an awful lot of ants, of which he took great exception to. So that's the kitchen area where, as far as Dave was concerned, was infested with ants. But I think having done more camping than perhaps he has, it's a case of getting on with it. But not ideal. But the owner's wife is very much a sort of letting all animals live, and that included the formic variety as well. Now, this is the accommodation. Now, very much a case of, I would say it's not for two people, and certainly Bob was in one and I was in the other. That Dave at one stage was going to be sharing it, but clearly once you set out your observing kit, it's very much a case there's no room for anybody else. Also interesting is that if you look at the window on the top, bearing in mind that as astronomers you're tending to sleep in the day, the complete lack of any blind was, and so therefore you have to either have a blanket to put over your head during the day to try and catch up on some sleep if you've been up all night. So reasonable accommodation if you're on your own. And it wasn't too costly. That was picture set up. One of the advantages or disadvantages, whichever way you look at it, was that the Kai has an awful lot of equipment over there, and I was using my Williams Optics 71mm refractor, which is the one on there, with the Canon 6D DSLR on there. But rather than paying for an extra couple of bags to go out to carry them out, I decided that I would hire his EQ5 and take my own power pack and computer sort of finding equipment. Unfortunately, he had a different version of it, and so having carried a whole load of stuff out there, including the weight, I had to use his equipment and just use my telescope on the top. So it wasn't too bad, but you end up having to pay for any items that you rent from him, whether you use them or not. So if you choose to book it in advance to know that you're going to have it, and you pay 60 euros for a week hire, if you were clouded out completely, you would still pay. And we sort of, it can be a disadvantage as well. But it does save you carrying stuff out if you want to limit the amount you take out. That was one of the jobs that he has available to him, and yes, we did inadvertently hire that for one night, and one was cloudy, and we negotiated a discount on that, but we didn't really use it, and so it was quite a costly thing. It's much better to choose actually on a day if you want to use it. If you've got a group of them, group of people, but it does take a while to set up, and it takes up one of the observing areas. That's the main dome, and if you want to shell out about 300 euros a night, then you can use that. But it's got its own observing area and control center which you can use, but let's say fairly costly. Disadvantages. Some of you will be aware of the Kalima, which basically is the Saharan dust, where you've got here that it blows, and the prevailing winds, it can come out over the Canaries. Very much a case of, if you've ever been to or go to Cape Verde, Cape Verde has pristine sandy beaches which have come from the Sahara. Tenerife and La Palma still have their lava black beaches, but if the prevailing wind is blowing out across there, then you will actually have all your pictures will be spoiled, as we've had on several occasions. This is also this is not one of Bob O'Reilly's pictures. This is Arno, one of the German people who was there, and obviously he's got a lovely Milky Way. He's got the in the background, he's got the laser, but what he's also got is the lights from where Bob and I were. They were observing right from down on their by their accommodation. The difficulty was that there are automatic, as soon as you walk past going back from up to the top, it lights up all the red lights that guide the individual paths. So it's a safety issue, but effectively what it does is that it can potentially ruin people's pictures if they're not aware of it. So that was one disadvantage. I know that some people, and sometimes you'll get people who take over the whole sort of eating area or whatever. This was Bob and I must admit, we had monopolised a little bit the dining area with setting up our kit and so on. But it's a nice area, wood burner there, which you can use as well. And the obligatory bottle of wine before we set up as well. Though you're right on the sites, you don't need to travel anywhere. You've got the opportunity to have your meal, get set up, and crack on with your observing. And this was when you're looking at things to observe, I really didn't know what I was going to observe that night, and so I thought, oh, I'll do a Messier Marathon, as I hadn't had particular success. Now this was the 7th and 8th of May in 1999. 1999? Yes, yeah. So normally when you're doing a Messier Marathon, to get the maximum amount of night time, you would go for March, April time. So by doing it in May, that it did mean that I wasn't going to have 110 objects to go for at the stage. So it's really a question of how many I would actually be able to get. The advantage of this was one of our second or third night. So I'd been able to set up and leave because it was really sort of clear in the day, so there wasn't any chance of rain, so I left the setup. So it did enable me to be set up immediately, sort of as soon as it got dark. And this was I think it's just about a day old moon. This was a shot with the screen on the back of the DSLR, just showing a very slight crescent moon as it's zoomed right in. But that was obviously a test I used just to make sure it was still aligned. As everybody on here, you've got the movement of the Earth. Now I know various people are doing it different ways now, but this one of the best ways to actually just set up is obviously using a polemaster. So if you're using a portable mount, it's a particularly good way to go. And I know that I think Keith and various others are potentially using Sharp Cap now to do that. But a few years ago, we looked at the polemaster, which was basically what we were using at the time. And so this was a sort of talk was based on using on that one. Effectively, this is the setup of the polemaster. You can vary your gain on the how many stars you see around Polaris. You then hopefully I go forward. It's okay. So once you've actually you've got Polaris in the middle. You then click on you then wind up this. You rotate the little circles to align your stars with what you're seeing with the ones on the computer. So you then turn those round. You have to then slew the scope through 30 degrees using the RA axis. Then you click on the star again. You go through a further 30 degrees and double click on it again, and after the third one, you get a circle round. So Polaris is obviously here, it should be here. So therefore you have to move it using the adjustable movements on the mount itself to bring that in those points together. You're then left with a ideal point as well as Polaris. So you move them right back over the top of one another, and then once you've achieved that, it gives you a point, and it then gives you a very fine. Even once you've done all that, it then gives you a fine, sort of very fine, to get those two. The red one has, or the green has to be above the red, or vice versa. That so you can use that, but quite frankly, it's if you're going to guide, or if you're taking short exposures, it's not necessary at all. That was the setup I had. I then used the marathon itself. Obviously, there's various guides to the marathon. That this particular one is, I'm not even sure if it's out of print now. I was using, unsurprisingly, the BAA John Potter's Deep Sky Messier catalogue, and within that there is on page 11 gives you the marathon sequence. Now I know when we did various ones with the Basingstoke ones, we handed out that there's, I think, the Antelope one, and there's various other ones. They're slightly different, but they effectively give you the order in which to look for the objects, taking into account the horizon and also the timings of the ones as they rise and set. So bearing in mind this was May, I'd worked out that even though you got something as daft as number 11 M45, that wasn't actually, go to that and it was just completely light. So the first ones basically were going to be 42 and 43. So as far as my 110 were concerned, that was going to be 12 of them. So I was down to a 98 maximum one, by the virtue of the fact that it was too light. Now I know when John Stapleton was doing that doing the marathon on the field, it was very much a case of, oh yes, seen that one, yeah, tick that one off, and whether the cynic in me would say, oh yes, it's like cheating at golf, but do people actually see that? Oh, it's a fuzzy blob. Oh yes, I've seen that one, definitely, that averted vision and all that. So what I wanted to do on this was to actually prove I'd seen them all. That so this particular, so using the backyard EOS gives you the focusing ability on there. It shows within the gives within the header, gives you this. These were lights. I thought I'd do 60 seconds. This is at ISO 3200. And basically gives the object as well. So each time I was able to got an individual picture of each object, so that I had that to prove in the center of the picture that I'd actually seen it. Now this is obviously, this is not a minute's exposure. This was one that I'd prepared earlier, and even I know Dave, you'll find it astounding. This was even one that I prepared in PixInsight as well. So that was how he's fallen off his chair now. So that's the sort of thing that you can get from the Williams Optics one. Basically, the guidance from Military Dave, I also used PixInsight to identify them and put the grid on, because I wanted to make sure that each one was correct. Effectively, that was what you could get. That's basically what I did get on that evening, because it was still twilight, and yes, whilst it's in the center of the picture, and you can, PixInsight picked up the various components of that to enable me to take them off. That was the first one I was able to count. Now this is one which really gave me the reason to put on this is an M78 is, I think, is like an emission nebula, and yes, is down here. This is why I put the markers on to show. Yes, it is. This is quite a clear asterism down here. But I thought it was easier for everybody if I put on the markers. So that was M78. We then go down the list. We got M35 on there. It obviously picks up other objects as well and marks those ones. The M37, a nice open cluster, and M36. They by and large they look so much the same, which is why if you were just ticking them off and saying yes, I've seen that you could actually get the wrong ones. So M38, obviously this is where I was centering them. So even having got the previous one, I'd recentered again and gave it a separate slide all of its own. Now, only 90 to go. So what I didn't want to do, some of you, given the number of people on the call who are newer to BAS, and we had a guy, Paul Money, who many of you will have heard of from Astronomy Now articles, and he did his whole show going through all 110 that he'd done from the Algarve, I believe. So I'm not going to put you through that, but just to give a taste of the marathon rather than look at each individual one. So this is I know DSW is one of his favourite ones. It's even his car registration number M44, the Beehive cluster. Lovely in a small scope. Leo triplet. What you basically get is that within the marathon, you have lots of time. You'll have periods of very busy time when you're either trying to get stuff at the start before it sets. You have then the period during the middle of the night that you've got the Leo and Virgo, where there are just absolute masses of Messier objects, and you just sort of trawl through them, sort of like collecting each one, ticking them off. But I just left those all together rather than showing you loads of separate ones. This is obviously I've been blown up considerably. It's a minute's exposure, and whilst darts and I did take some darts and flats, which I thought I could use if I wanted to. In reality, it seems a little point on a minute exposure. But yeah, that shows quite clearly that I've got the right thing anyway. M3, a lovely globular cluster, excellent, and then very much a case the setup continues to track. So, and as I said, you had downtime. So during the night, we did actually go up and have, I don't know quite why, I wouldn't normally have toast in the middle of the night, but you do get particularly hungry, and it's if you are staying up all night, you do need to keep your sugar levels up. And that was one of the good things. The disadvantage to other people was, yes, the lights came on when we came back up to it, but certainly you need something to keep you going if you're staying up all night. So then back down there again, Macarian's chain, that you've got a whole load of them, which I've just incorporated on the one slide, because rather than showing you individual ones. A lovely area, and it's just great to be, yes, whilst you're taking the pictures at the time, it spoils you, and that's unfortunately another thing. When you come back, you look out and there's sort of wispy cloud, and you think, really, it's just so clear over there. So we're now moving towards the end. That you've got the Trifid Lagoon nebulas, which are down into Sagittarius, but starting to get light by that stage, and yeah, whilst you've got the dust in the bottom left-hand corner, the Milky Way's dust, still it's a lovely site to concentrate on, but not that evening wasn't the one to do so. And then you have the final rush, which is basically trying to get as many as possible. So that was M8, which was M8 is number 98 on the list. So I still had quite a few to go, as you can see there. So this was M2, another globular cluster, that was 638. 639, M72 and M73 that ticked off, and M30, which was the final one on my list, which would normally be down the bottom here, will be the 110th item. So it's then very much a case of going back to see were there any ones that I could actually finally catch up on between 1 and 12 to get me sort of up. I was trying to get over the 100. So this was my final picture, which is basically, yes, I've got 3 here. Yes, you've got M31, which you can actually see, M32, which you can see, and M110 is there, but it was being drowned out by the morning sky. So that was my final picture of the marathon. And in the end, that was 100 Messier objects imaged and verified out of a total of 110, which for a 7th and 8th of May wasn't too bad, but it was, yeah, good fun and gave me something to do. So it's a case of you plan, having it set up, the go-to set up before is a huge advantage, and some people would say cheating at golf as well. Anyway, that was my final picture. That is obviously the Milky Way coming down. That was the last morning before we headed off to the airport, that I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I couldn't get back to sleep again, and thought, oh, I'll go out and take a picture. So a 15-second single shot JPEG, looking up over towards the Sagittarius, and with nobody else's red light or laser pointers in sight. So thank you very much indeed.